Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, with you, sharing some further astrological insights for you guys. Today's subject is in relation to the moon's nodes, and more specifically, it's in relation to having planets conjunct the south node. So, few things to cover. I guess the first thing is that just remember that when we are looking at the moon's nodes in the birth chart, we are looking at the location of the houses that polarity axis is in terms of in your birth chart. We are looking at the signs of the south node and the north node, and then we are looking at any aspects to those nodes. So for some people, sometimes there can be, multiple things going on with the nodes. They can have a planet conjunct the south node, conjunct the north node, and then planets squaring those nodes as well. So it can be quite complex in terms of the various layers that can show up for different people. And obviously the evaluation of that is a much broader, larger, and deeper assessment and investigation into what that means for the individual. However, today is primarily focused on planets conjunct the south node, and even just that alone is a very, very, very powerful and important statement, signature, and description of past life developmental characteristics of the person's ego, essentially. And obviously the planet that's connecting to the south node is going to describe for you the past lives of the person in terms of what they worked with over and over again, what they developed quite strongly. Because when we are talking about the energy of the south node and the planet conjunct the south node, now conjunction means that two bodies are basically standing side by side. Now, the orb for a conjunction to a south node can be quite wide. It can be up to 10 degrees. Some authors or some astrologers extend that up to 15 degrees, such as Mark Jones, for instance, in his book Healing the Soul. He allows for up to 15 degrees for Pluto to be conjunct the north node or conjunct the south node. Now, I don't disagree with that. I can see the value in that. I guess it's always just going to come down to looking at charts over and over again. And even when you are looking at somebody's chart, say you are working with astrology, if you're looking at somebody's chart and they have Pluto conjunct the south or north node, and let's just say it is 15 degrees wide, then you can ask them some pretty specific questions, which would pretty much alert you as to whether that Pluto is really affecting that south or north node, which it more than likely is, even if it's 15 degrees apart. When it comes to other planets, I don't know that I would use 15 degrees. It's quite wide, but that's something that you need to, I suppose, explore with. I usually use up to 10 degrees. So when we are talking about the south node and the north node, as I said, it's our it pertains to our evolutionary path. This well, not just this lifetime, but in general, our evolutionary path, which has entry points and exit points in terms of this material world and this personality, body that we take on. And Uranus is also connected to our evolution from the point of view of, it describes our path of individuation. Now, Uranus is very important in this picture because Uranus is connected to our long-term memory. And that can pertain to experience in infancy in this lifetime and experiences in any other lifetime. So if that statement is correct, which I feel and believe it is, then that would imply that the long-term memory within us contains all the various experiences that we've had, which includes things from, you know, skills and gifts and talents to traumas, abuse, you know, more challenging experiences is what I'm trying to get at, you know, difficult relationships, matters of power and powerlessness, you know, all those sorts of experiences are somehow retained in the memory body, the long-term memory body, which Uranus is connected to. So, you know, we have this evolutionary path, which is very much understood by the moon's nodes, Pluto's location, and I would add to that, you know, Uranus as well, because Uranus holds the long-term memory, so it can give us clues. So when we have a planet conjunct the South Node, then that particular planet holds a great deal of influence and importance in terms of the energies that we have manifested very, very strongly in a number of, you know, we don't know how many lifetimes, but probably multiple lifetimes. Something about that planetary energy has been really worked through, overdeveloped, maybe you could even say, has had a lot of emphasis and focus. Now, if it's the sun or the moon, then one might say, well, you know, the sun and the moon, isn't that something that is, you know, so primary and important in every lifetime, and that we, you know, need to absolutely express and actualize and develop? And that's absolutely correct. So I guess the thing that I would like to kind of share, I suppose, is, well, let me start. When you have, first of all, before I go there, just another note to note for yourselves is that when planets are conjunct the South Node, which is what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to just give you some ideas of each planet conjunct the South Node. That pertains to the past. So when it's the sun, it's going to connect to the father, and I'll start discussing that in a moment. But when we have planets conjunct the North Node, and let's say it is the sun, which I'll have to do another video for this, but just a note to keep in mind, when we have planets conjunct the North Node, they can always indicate and point to the types of people we're going to meet this lifetime that are actually going to help us on our path towards that North Node. In other words, we're going to potentially form very important fated sort of connections with people that will somehow foster or nurture our path on that North Node. When I'm talking about when you have a planet conjunct the North Node. That's one level of interpretation in my understanding. In addition to that, when you have planets conjunct the South Node, then it's the opposite to that, in the sense where you've had many, many lifetimes and experiences cultivating this energy, and perhaps, let's just say it's the sun. So now I can start. If you have the sun conjunct the South Node, what I have seen many times over in many readings I've done, and including in people that I know in my own personal life as well, the sun on the South Node always seems to show up issues pertaining to the father. That is, the father that the person has this lifetime. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be difficult. There would be other things that you probably that would add to that if it was going to be difficult. But it can be difficult and challenging, and at the same time, and it can also be bringing forth and bringing in very strong skills and gifts and talents pertaining to that energy, which is the solar expression. But usually it's the father when the sun is conjunct the South Node. there is often something very significant about the relationship this lifetime between the person who has the South Node on their sun on their South Node, and their father in this lifetime. There is usually an unfinished karmic element between those two souls, and the fact that this soul is born and his son is on the South Node, indicating that his father this lifetime is somebody that he has unfinished business with, is a very specific story. It's a very specific. There's a very specific reason as to why this person is the child to this father, and why that soul has taken on the role of father. I mean, to really get greater depth around that, you would probably want to look at the father's chart as well. You know, so you look at the person who has got Sun conjunct South Node, and then you could look at the father's chart as well. But you wouldn't even have to. Just a standalone chart, your chart. If you have the Sun conjunct South Node, that can very easily be, and quite often is. I've never seen it not to be thus far. Very important relationship with the father that's often quite difficult and challenging. Something unresolved, incomplete, that needs to be met this lifetime. And as I said, I've never seen it to necessarily be an easy thing per se. I just want to read this to you. Conjunctions to the South Node mean this. Karmic lessons taking more than one lifetime to learn show up with strongly planetary conjunctions to the South Node. The addition of such planetary energies to the soul's remembrance of its purpose creates a mandatory condition wherein the South Node lessons are to be lived again. So the South Node is so important anyway, and putting a planet right next to it there is implying and indicating even more that there's some really important lessons that still have not been worked through in terms of the soul's evolution. This configuration meaning a planet conjunct the South Node. Now this can be any planet. This configuration should not necessarily be deemed a negative condition. Individuals who have acquired a great deal of knowledge or talent are thusly afforded a second chance at bringing their accomplishments to a flowering culmination. Now, apart from the father component, you know, the Sun conjunct the South Node can also be that a person has been very famous in a previous incarnation. They lived a life where they had strong leadership, a role in a strong leadership position, you know, such as politicians, government, some kind of leadership position that the person held a strong space in it. That would be the Sun conjunct the South Node as well. So there's a few different levels and layers of interpretation, but one thing you can really be confident in knowing is that the Sun on the South Node definitely describes something about the relationship between the person and their current father, and it is almost always unresolved karmic issues. Now, moving on to the Moon. The Moon is the mother. Sorry, just one thing before I continue with the Moon. The Sun on the South Node, if it's a woman, let's just say you're a woman and you have the Sun on the South Node, it can imply, you know, this unfinished business with your father this lifetime, but it can also be matters relating to relationships with other men in your life as well. So it may be attracting men that you've had very important connections with in the past, where something wasn't completed and learned as your soul actually desired. Now, the soul always desires and intends to evolve in the way that it does, and it is other factors in the chart which describe the possibilities and potentials of how a person's life may unfold. And then, you know, it's not set in stone. There's all sorts of levels and potential ways that energies can express. So it just depends on how that takes shape in any given life for any given soul or individual. So, and this Sun conjunct the South Node, it can be for men as well. Men can have some pretty important connections with men in this lifetime. So going to the moon is the mother and women. Relationships to women and the relationship to the mother. It's the nurturing, mothering principle. And there's something very important regarding the person this lifetime and the mother they have this lifetime, some unfinished relationship, again, between the person who has moon conjunct the South Node and their mother this lifetime. It can be a biological mother, but it can also be a mother who's played the motherly or mothering, you know, primary figure in the person's life. Because there are all sorts of circumstances and situations where not everybody has their biological mother with them from birth, but for so many different reasons, and so many people have that experience. And actually, you know, if you just want to add a bit more of another layer, just to give you another example, if somebody had the South Node conjunct the moon and Chiron was there as well, let's just say, that can be a person who is born this lifetime with their mother totally rejecting them, so giving them up for adoption. That would be an experience of rejection for the person who has the South Node Moon Chiron conjunct in their birth chart. Or it can be mother who died at birth. It can be the mother who is just so incredibly emotionally wounded and crippled in her own self that she couldn't actually mother this person that she's given birth to. So there's a lot of different expressions that can come through. Anyway, that's just one example. But the moon conjunct the South Node is frequently unresolved matters with the mother that show up this lifetime, including specific women in the person's life as well. Something about the nurturing principle that shows up in a very important way this lifetime for the person. That can also be their own mothering, nurturing principles and qualities that need to undergo more lessons this lifetime. Mercury is always connected to siblings, so the relationships one has with their siblings. It can just be one sibling. So something about this relationship between you and your brother or your sister, if you have Mercury conjunct the South Node, is indicative that you've had a relationship with this sibling before. Something very important that still needs further development. That's why you've come back together in this lifetime, as it were. It can also be talents around writing, writing books, and all skills and talents to do with the written spoken word. So it could be somebody who has incredible skills at being you know, a mentor, a teacher, someone who is going to write a lot of books or has written a lot of books, certainly. Somebody who's just got a lot of skills and talents with the written spoken word in the myriad of ways that can show up. But it can also be something about a relationship to one of their siblings. And people feel this. I mean, I've seen it in, you know, many people's charts, and I've spoken to people and I've asked them, you know, the questions. do you have a sibling in your life where you feel that there's some important karmic connection between the two of you? The answer has always been yes. Venus, obviously that's about the feminine magnetic principle of attraction, and women relationships. It's also about the creative talents, artistic components that we bring in with us, anything to do with artistry essentially. So we could have been a dancer, we could have been a singer, we could have been some kind of performer, some kind of artist in the past. So very strong talents around that. And when it comes to the feminine component, it could be unfinished matters to do with very important relationships this lifetime that show up again, because Venus is the planet that connects to relationships as much as it does for artistry and things of that nature. It can be other things as well, but I'm just trying to get through this video by discussing every single planet. So just want to try and keep it slightly concise. So if it's a man, just a quick point, if it's a man and he has Venus conjunct the South Node, it would be no surprise to me whatsoever that he would attract relationships this lifetime that are predominantly all past life connections. Most, if not all. Mars is a real difficult one, as I guess we would expect it to be. Mars is a malefic planet, as is Saturn. In terms of traditional astrology, Mars and Saturn were always known as the malefic planets. Now, in more modernized astrology, those terms are not frequently used, but it's important to understand, traditional astrology and the terminology and ways of understanding things at that time still has value. It's just a question of filtering it through relevant to the person and the context of their life and circumstances and so forth. But never disregard Mars or Saturn as being inherent malefics, because they are. That's just their fundamental inherent nature. Not that they can't produce success or good results. They can, absolutely. And even in ancient traditional astrology, there is some scope of perspective on that as well. But essentially, inherently, Mars, Saturn are malefic, period. So Mars conjunct the South Node is a pretty tricky energy because for a start, it can be a lot of suppressed anger, unexpressed anger, suppressed anger, issues around violence and power, abuse, suppressed anger, unresolved anger, and relationships with men, right? So if you're a woman and you have Mars conjunct your South Node, you may have been in relationships with men in the past where there was a power, abuse of power that took place. Now that could have been you, that could have been that happening to you, it could have been a bit of both. There are other things that will fine-tune a more specific answer to those comments or questions. But this is just to give you a general idea. If you're a man, it can be your own sense of Mars energy. You may have used that Mars, and this can apply to a woman as well. You may have used that Mars energy in a very in a way that was destructive or hurtful or abusive towards others, and therefore this lifetime Mars has real prominence in your life. You need to learn how to use that Mars energy in a very different way. That can be Mars in the 12th house as well. So, and that can be a Mars-Neptune conjunction too. But Mars conjunct South Node always pertains to some kind of suppressed anger, hidden anger, unresolved anger, and certainly connecting to men as well. Can also be having lived a life where you were, in front line, in a war zone, because Mars has got to do, it's the god of war. So all the Mars things, anything that is representative of Mars, relate to, you know, or could relate to this Mars in the South Node. Can be athletes as well on a more positive level, because Mars rules athletes. So there's a number of different levels of this energy, but certainly something pertaining to the person's drive, willpower, and assertion. Something has gone wrong with that. Something needs to be resolved. Something further needs to be understood, and more lessons need to be experienced around how this Mars energy is played out. Okay. Saturn, again, you know, that's a malefic planet, so that's a tricky energy. Saturn conjunct the South Node, you know, that can connect to family as well. There would be other things that would further enhance that, such as Saturn in Cancer, for instance, Saturn in the 4th house, Saturn in the 8th and Saturn in the 12th. They too can actually correlate to ancestral past life karmic issues with family members. But Saturn conjunct the South Node pertains to unresolved karma connecting to authority figures, man-made law, all things pertaining to the world of structure. You might have been a person who just broke the law constantly. And you did it so much that, you know, you got away with it, and you got away with it, and you got away with it, and maybe this lifetime you need to learn how to obey the apparent man-made laws that we're all subjected to. I'm laughing because I've met many people who carry this kind of signature, and yeah, I find it amusing personally. It can also be, though, on a more serious note, it can be there can be a lot of deep psychological fears and anxieties around how to get your life in order and structured this lifetime. It can be a lot of stuck and repressed sort of energy, and it can therefore, then this lifetime, you can be presented with situations or conditions that may prove to be incredibly difficult and challenging when it comes to the law in some kind of way. Jupiter, that's, you know, that's the greater benefic, as it is known. So it's not an inherently difficult energy in the same way Venus is not an inherently difficult energy either. Venus and Jupiter are the benefics of the bodies in our heavens. Venus, the lesser benefic, and Jupiter, the greater benefic. This terminology pertains to traditional astrology. And I do have this kind of thinking in when I'm looking at the astrological energies and configurations, because I do find it useful. Jupiter conjunct the South Node can connect to gurus, teachers, philosophers, religion, preachers, priests, lots of different cultures. So the person, you know, has experienced a lot of experiences, perhaps in multiple lifetimes, to do with all that Jupiter stuff. You know, connecting to philosophy and religion, and expanding the individual's life through that 9th house stuff. Jupiter is 9th house. So maybe the person was some kind of guru. Maybe they had strong connections with guru type people. Maybe they were a preacher in a past life or past lives, or teaching, philosophy, things of that nature. So nothing difficult, inherently difficult. But something about that energy is very strong in the person, so they may just have incredible wisdom that they bring through into this lifetime, that teaching and philosophizing and being a mentor and inspiring people and teaching and all that sort of stuff is so inherently strong within them. Something, they've got so many gifts and skills and talents around that, they bring that forth this lifetime. But there is something about that that still needs to be worked through in some kind of way. But as I said, that's not necessarily a difficult configuration. Uranus, well, that can be the rebellious soul, the person who, has had strong desires for freedom in previous lives and has connected to many different groups that were rebellious or very, innovative, people who are on the path of strong individuation. Innovative, humanitarian type of quality and energy, connecting to groups and people where they broke all the rules, were not a part of the consensus state, were incredibly individualized, had very strong humanitarian, visionary type of dreams and ideals, incredibly rebellious, as I said. It can also connect to trauma, though, past life trauma, because in EA astrology, evolutionary astrology, Uranus is the planet that's associated to trauma. One of the reasons is because Uranus connects to the long-term memory that we still retain within us. And Uranus is also the planet that connects to shock, experiencing a shock in life, the unpredictability of things as well. And trauma, as much as it sounds like such a serious word, because it is, it depends what stream you are understanding that word through. But in the medical field, trauma is quite a serious thing to go through, whether it's mental trauma, emotional, physical, etc. But trauma is generally not a nice experience and something that sometimes kills people or debilitates people, or there's a number of different things that can result from trauma. But ultimately, trauma can also take place because the soul is really needing to break out of something that's kept them very stuck. Certain patterns that we can be expressing over and over and over, such as certain emotional patterns, certain mental patterns that keep us very stuck because of Saturn. They keep us limited. They don't allow the soul to evolve and grow. There's something very stuck about it. So having a traumatic type of experience, which is Uranus, can shock you, which is Uranus, out of an old way of being. So it can help you transform and release very old, stale patterns that do not foster the development of your soul. So Uranus can be very, very tricky energy. It's very difficult to predict because Uranus rules the unpredictable. But when I see Uranus conjunct the South Node, there's a strong sense that the person has lived quite a different life to the consensus mainstream. So a lot of those qualities will come through this lifetime, and you will see it in their life in some kind of way. They don't live in the normal, expected way, as it were. Now, what is defined as normal? I personally don't think there is such a thing as normal, but that's because I'm a double Aquarian with strong Uranus in my chart. But for some people, the norm or the normal way of living would be to, live a heterosexual life, to get married, to have children, to work, to buy a house, to have a car, to raise your children, and then take them through that process, to put it very simply. And I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with that. For some people, that way of life is very natural, very normal, very necessary. And for others, it's not. But that would be more of a normal way of viewing a normal life, if you like. So when somebody has strong Uranus in their chart, they don't usually live that normal life, just not for them. Someone who has Uranus conjunct the South Node will likely not live that normal life. I know someone quite well who I've been doing readings for many, many years. This person is an Aquarian, so they're already quite different anyway. But they have Uranus conjunct the South Node. And as much as on one level this person appears to live a normal life in terms they have like a conventional type of career, in their personal life and in what they do in their private life and what they enjoy wouldn't be considered normal necessarily. They're quite unique, quite different, quite Uranian, quite Aquarian, and never had children, never kind of settled down and just stayed with one person, never lived that normal sort of life, as it were. So you can see these energies, they can take the form in many different streams in terms of how they emerge and what they end up sort of manifesting for us. Neptune conjunct the South Node is also a very tricky sort of energy. Well, because Neptune itself is not easy to materialize, frame, make tangible. So it's an elusive energy. It's like a fog. Neptune rules fogs. It rules the mist. If you're walking in the woods and you're walking through mist and fog, that would be like having transiting Neptune on your ascendant, or that would be like having Neptune on your ascendant natally. If that's how you kind of walk through life, through a bit of a mist and a fog. But you're so used to it, it doesn't seem like a fog or a mist. It's just a natural way of operation for you. But if you have Neptune transiting your ascendant and you don't have Neptune on your ascendant natally, that Neptune on your ascendant can be a really difficult transit to handle. So Neptune conjunct the South Node, past lives can pertain to obviously having lived strong spiritual experiences in lifetimes, which can include, a lot of isolation. You may have been a nun or a monk, or just lived in, just total isolation, removed from the population and society, as it were. You might have been an actor, an artist, a musician. You might have been a drug addict. You might have been a spiritual guru, teacher. You may have been a victim. Or you may have been in prison. The 12th house connects to prison. Neptune rules the 12th house, and it might sound strange to you to associate prison with the 12th house, because the 12th house is Neptune Pisces, and people just automatically think that the 12th house is connected to all this love and bliss and beautiful floaty angels and spirits and energy. And yeah, it is all of that, but it can also be prison. That's how vast the 12th house is. And the reason it can be a prison, just to help you understand if you don't already, The 12th house is the house of isolation. So what is prison? Prison is a place of isolation, isn't it? So Neptune on the south node can be very, very tricky. And Pluto on the south node, well, that's a big one. That's a real oozy doozy woozy big one. Why? Because Pluto is soul. So now imagine having Pluto conjunct the south node and having the sun there, and or even just the sun. Done a reading for someone who had Pluto and the sun conjunct the south node, and there's other configurations that would add to this story, but this person had a very difficult, challenging relationship with his father pertaining to experiences of power and powerlessness, and also matters around authority this lifetime, and having conflict with authority this lifetime as well. And that's the Sun Pluto conjunct the South Node. Because this person, from a soul level, has such tremendous power in terms of what his soul has experienced. Pluto conjunct the South Node. There's been a lot of evolving taking place. And there's also been a lot of experiences over lifetimes where this person has had tremendous power. Pluto represents power, period. So when you have Pluto conjunct the South Node, there's something about your soul's force and energy that has tremendous power that can actually be very, very overpowering and threatening to people in this lifetime. So this lifetime, the person needs to really work around those issues of power within himself, and how he can actualize that power in a way that's going to be most fruitful to his soul's evolution. And that can come through experiences of feeling needing to abuse power or being abused by power this lifetime. And as a result, the soul somehow will resolve and work through what he needs to work through with these experiences. That seems to be a very common experience with Pluto conjunct the South Node. So Pluto conjunct the South Node highlights reliving the karmic past. Could be connected to lives of great power and disempowerment, as I've just mentioned. There is access to past strengths, talents, and gifts, as well as the resistances, lessons, or blockages could also come up very strongly. Blockages and strengths and gifts can come up with any planet conjunct the South Node. So that understanding of bringing in gifts and talents, resistances and blocks pertains to any planet conjunct the South Node, but obviously the planet conjunct the South Node will describe for you, as I've just been through every single planet, what sorts of gifts and what sorts of talents and what sorts of blocks or resistances, and in what part of life and what sort of relationships will these generally show up. So there you go. That's just an introduction, by the way. Hopefully it's a useful introduction for you, though, that can help you make more sense out of planets conjunct the South Node in your own chart, or people's charts that you are currently working with or exploring and so forth. So thank you so much for watching and for tuning in. Thank you again for subscribing, and thank you for questions and comments, compliments, curiosities. Bring it on, whatever. It's all, you know, it's all appreciated and welcomed. This video was requested by one of my viewers, since I did a video on planets squaring the nodes, and someone commented in that video, could you do a video with planets conjunct the node. So what I've done today is planets conjunct the south node. So at some stage I will do a follow-up video with planets conjunct the north node. And then I might also do a video with planets conjunct the south node and the north node, because that's obviously a different sort of a different mix. Mix. I'm just thinking of music. Yeah, it's like I was actually thinking of a cosmic, cosmic sort of. It's sometimes I look at life and I think it's a bit of a cosmic sort of big soup. That sounds weird, and everything's just kind of, it's just all kind of flying around, and we ride all these different waves, and sometimes we're on this wave, and sometimes we're on that wave, and sometimes we're in a tsunami, and sometimes we get taken under, and then we come back up and we breathe again, and it's like this massive soup bowl, and we're all just kind of floating around in it, being taken in all sorts of different ways, and then sometimes we feel more in control. That's all probably pertaining to my 12th house. I have a pretty strong 12th house, so that's where that probably comes from. All right, and today I have been feeling, today is the 8th of October 2018, and today's energies have felt really weird. We're in a balsamic moon phase. The moon's right at the end of Virgo. We're just approaching a new moon, but not there yet. So there's a lot of, and the moon in Virgo has been opposite Chiron today, because Chiron is back in Pisces. So lots of weird energy floating around. It hasn't been that nice, if I say so myself. So wondering how you guys are going with it. Feel free to let me know. I'll be doing another update shortly. My last update was on Venus retrograde in Scorpio. I hope you guys enjoyed that and got some pointers out of that. So I'll be back soon with something else. Don't know what. We'll see. We'll see what comes up. See you guys soon.